Just like us, plants eat and drink to grow, be healthy, and stay alive.
And while it's generally thought that they make their own food, plants are not magic, and their nutrients don't simply appear out of thin air.
What actually happens is plants use specific elements from their surroundings, 14 to be exact, along with air, water, and of course light, to carry out all the processes that help them grow and develop.
Ugh. Today, I want to look at all the nutrients that plants use and why they use them. Only then will we know what to look for when maybe things aren't going our way. That'll give us the clues to what the plants want from us so that we can continue to get the best harvests.
A common misconception is that plants simply make all their own food from the sun.
And while, yes, they are autonomous in this respect, it's not really a meal that they make. Photosynthesis is the name of the process, and the product isn't so much a food as it is a fuel.
It's a biological blueprint to manufacture complex carbohydrates and sugars. And with these sugars as a fuel, plants can then go ahead and metabolize, grow, and reproduce using those 14 elements that we mentioned earlier.
So, what are these nutrients? Well, similar to how humans use vitamins, plant nutrients are responsible for all the growth and development of our crops. And they're divided into three categories based on the amount that the plants need them.
Primary and secondary macronutrients, and then micronutrients. Let's kick it off with the macronutrients first, starting with the primary. Primary macronutrients are the biggie, and it's divided into your NPK, your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These are the three elements that all plants need in the highest quantity. And it's no coincidence that whenever you're buying fertilizer at the store, it's listed there right on the front of the label. Whenever we're talking plant fertilizers, NPK is right there at the forefront, and each of the elements supports major plant functions.
Nitrogen is the big one that most people focus on, as it's responsible for so many of the plant's processes as well as all of the growth and development.
Nitrogen is necessary for photosynthesis as well as protein and amino acid creation. Deficiencies manifest themselves as yellowing of the leaves, then stunted growth, then leaf drop, then no growth at all. Not all nitrogen deficiency is caused by a lack of availability, with overwatering and drought being major factors as well.
Next up, we have phosphorus. This nutrient is essential for energy transfer, root growth, and flower/fruit development. This is the second of the NPK numbers, and it does a lot of the background heavy lifting.
Phosphorus helps our crops to withstand stress, particularly the heat and cold, and it's responsible for the overall plant vigor. Lack of this primary element often manifests itself in the purpling of the leaves, and in severe cases, the complete absence of flowers and thus fruit.
Phosphorus is a biggie, no doubt, but then so is this next one, the last of the primary macros. That's right, I'm talking K or potassium.
Potassium admirably rounds out our NPK, and it's responsible for water regulation, cell structure, and just keeping our plants upright and rigid. Like phosphorus, this element also fortifies our plants and helps with resiliency against environmental stress, particularly low temperatures. Deficiencies are usually noticed by black spots on the leaves and a decline in overall vigor. Low potassium is rarely an issue with most soils, but if it is, a simple remedy with a fertilizer that skews higher in the third number will do the trick.
Okay, with the primaries done, let's go ahead and look at those secondary macronutrients, of which there are also three. The first of these has to be the most misunderstood, and that's calcium.
Calcium is all about cell walls and building a better plant. It's abundant in most soils, but one of the most common afflictions in our gardens, blossom end rot, is due to a calcium deficiency. However, it's almost never caused by a lack of calcium in the soil. Instead, blossom end rot is usually the result of intermittent watering or moisture issues. Calcium needs sufficient water to be transported, and the bottom of our fruit, such as these tomatoes here, is the furthest part of the plant away from the roots. If there isn't enough water to get the calcium to those cell walls, well, that results in blossom end rot. Calcium is massively important, but it's rarely lacking.
For our next secondary macronutrient, we've got magnesium. This is what helps keep our plants green, like this cantaloupe here, as magnesium is at the center of the chlorophyll molecule.
It's not just essential for photosynthesis, though. Magnesium also helps our plants to absorb phosphorus and then move it around the plant to get it to where it needs to go. A lack of magnesium usually manifests itself in our leaves losing their green color everywhere but along the veins. As an enzyme activator, magnesium is absolutely crucial for our plants. It's listed as a secondary macro only because it's so good and effective at what it does.
Another big helper, which these onions absolutely love, is our third and final secondary macronutrient, and that's sulfur. Like magnesium, sulfur helps to process and move other nutrients around within the plant, in this case, nitrogen.
It does this while also fortifying the plant's defensive systems and even helping with protein and tissue formation. Lack of sulfur in the soil is truly rare, but if it is, you'll see a lightening of the leaves and a decrease in overall vigor. Elemental sulfur or ammonium sulfate are an easy fix though, which is great for plants like rhodies and blueberries as it helps to drop the pH for these acid-loving crops.
Our final category is, of course, micronutrients. These are elements that are still needed by the plant to keep them healthy, just in smaller quantities. Deficiencies are going to result in stunted growth or yellowing of the leaves, known as chlorosis. Two things that are always going to negatively impact our yields.
In no certain order, the list of micronutrients needed for healthy plant growth is as follows: boron, chlorine, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, nickel, and zinc. Micronutrients can be just as important as the macros, they're just required in far less quantities. Their roles in crop health are wide, varied, but also critical. Often, they're used as conduits for the uptake and absorption of the macronutrients. Micronutrients, also known as trace elements, often become deficient in sandy soils, soils with low organic content, and soils with pH issues. There can be some pretty severe telltale signs that our plants are missing one or more of these critical elements. Fortunately, the applications are pretty quick acting and the damages are usually not permanent. Costs, though, are typically much higher with micronutrients, as they're needed in far less quantities. As such, broadcast applications are usually avoided. Instead, growers implement a technique known as banding. This is where the nutrients are placed in a much more concentrated, narrowed zone. As well, some micronutrients are applied using foliar feeding of the leaves, which is particularly effective with iron, manganese, and zinc. Micronutrients may be micro in name and quantity, but they're absolute monsters in function.
Although that was a lot of information, it barely scratches the surface of plant nutrition. Still, let's go ahead and recap the main points so that we can absorb it all too.
Plants use air, water, carbon, and light to make and process sugars to power their existence. With this fuel, they can then use the specific elements in the soil, 14 to be exact, to then grow, build, and reproduce. These elements are grouped into 3 categories based on the amount that plants need. Primary macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, or NPK, are needed in the biggest quantity. Next, we've got our secondary macronutrients, which are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Rounding out the list are our micronutrients, also known as trace elements. These would be boron, chlorine, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, nickel, and zinc. All 14 are important and all have multiple roles in the function of the plant, in its health, and in its ability to provide us with a harvest. Deficiencies happen, but most don't do permanent damage if caught early enough and corrected. Use the clues that your plants give you, particularly the leaves, and ensure that they have all they need to perform their best. Using a process called photosynthesis, plants make their own food. Rather than being building blocks, though, it's more of pure energy.
Necessary, yes, but to get the full potential of our plants and thus the harvest later on, the 14 elemental nutrients that we mentioned here today are absolutely vital to make this happen. Food for thought. Till next time, though. As always, guys, happy growing, and I'll see you soon.